is going on, everyone, and welcome to Bending the Narrative here on the Aspect Network. I'm one of your hosts, Alex Batts, and joining me today every week to discuss the latest and greatest in the world of Avatar is Kate Kronquist. Kate, how are you doing today?
Alex, I'm doing great. Thank you so much. So today we are taking a much needed pit stop with the episode The King of Omashu. So to start this week, let's take a look at the Avatar map and track Team Avatar's journey.
This is really cool. This is fun. We're making some solid progress on the map now, which is nice.
I love this map so much. It's so cool.
It's crazy. We've mentioned it every episode, but like mad props to whoever put this map together.
Whoever made this, it doesn't say who the artist is. So if you're out there and listening to this, please let us know. Yeah. This map is awesome.
Incredible work. So it's cool. We're going to Omashu, which is nice.
We're right next to the Siwang Desert.
Yeah, which will be like super pivotal later on. That's going to be a lot of trauma there, which is fun.
A lot of trauma there.
Yeah, but I mean, they like traveled pretty far between Kyoshi Island and getting here, which is nice.
Yeah, it's a pretty good distance.
Yeah, we'll like go back to and get through some of this land in later episodes too. Some of what they like flew over, which is nice. It's fun stuff. But yeah, I mean,
it's very cool. We've made it about like halfway up the map too. This is about halfway up to the North Pole.
That's a good point, which they have to.
I should be pointing at the map.
Which that's their whole goal. They got to get to the very top. It'll take them a bit though. They're they keep on taking all these detours and these side quests, which are important. But I mean, come on, Egg, you get it together, man. Like
you kind of got to save the world.
Yeah, like you got some things to take care of, man. We should just not stop everywhere.
It's okay. I do the same thing when I go to do my laundry.
You're just like, oh.
I'm like, I gotta take a pit stop and ride the koi fish. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, just gotta go to the backyard real quick. And maybe there's some, what are they? The Komodo rhinos, right? Yeah.
Just hanging in your backyard.
Yeah, that'd be so sick.
That's a big problem.
So yeah, I mean, it's fun. It's cool. I like the map a lot. I like that it has all of the like arrows, so you can actually see the journey, and it's got it all like marked in the different colors and stuff too, which is nice.
Based on which book we're in, it's very cool. And like my map, this one doesn't have it, but my map has a key of who's on that journey and like what the color means, what book it is.
Okay.
And like who's on that ride.
That makes sense. That's smart. I do like that it still has the episode like title in there. And the number next to it is very helpful too. It's
very cool. Like what season, what episode. It's so great.
We'll be back at Omashu eventually. We'll get there again in book 2, which will be nice. The return. But yeah, this is our first time in Omashu, which is fun stuff.
And first time in anywhere near Earth Kingdom, or is Kyoshi technically Earth Kingdom?
I think so. Kyoshi Island is technically Earth Kingdom. We don't see any earth bending there though. We just, but it is because I mean she was from the Earth Kingdom. So
Earth Kingdom,
yeah. So that is Earth Kingdom technically, but this is really our first big introduction to the Earth Kingdom. So as we've said, obviously this week we're here at the great city of Omashu with episode 5, directed by Anthony Leoy and written by John O'Brien. And if you're just joining us and this is your first episode, which would be kind of weird, you should probably go listen to and watch the other ones. But
we're not going to judge them. We're not going to judge.
Yeah, I mean, if this is your first one, awesome, welcome. But with that, be warned that we'll be discussing the show in its totality. So spoilers ahead, obviously. Kate, let's start with you to kind of dive into this episode.
I just want to get out of the way first. A lot of people say this is a filler episode and they don't like it. It's their least favorite episode. And I want to squash the hate. I want to squash the haters right now. Because like a lot happens for the main plot, and I get why they can see it as a filler episode. They kind of divulge from the main plot a lot, and not a lot. The only things that happen at the end have to do with the main plot. So I get that. But I think it's still great. It shows us so much, and we get so much from this episode. We get the Cabbage Man. We get Boomy. Iconic. We see earthbending for the first time. We see a big city for the first time. This is the first big city we see. This is a great world building episode. We really see what it's like outside of these villages and what this world is. This really gives us so much insight into where we are. and like how this world works. We see the trading, the mail system, the engineering, so many great things. I almost wanted to say the flying people, but that's in the live action. They do that when they combine everything, not in this one.
Yeah, that's
not
true.
in the real series.
I can't believe that happened.
We'll get there, guys. We're gonna get there. We'll talk about that. But I do like that this is a simple episode. It's a simple plot. And a lot of people think it's almost too simple. They don't like it, but I like that we have Aang needs to do these 3, challenges.
Yeah.
And it really shows us how smart, like, I feel like a good thing this episode does is we see how smart every character is. Every character has their chance to shine. We see like Sokka has these great ideas. We see Aang like getting over these challenges. Everybody, I love it. It's so good. Let's see what else.
It's amazing. It really, I mean, to what you were saying, it's not the most things don't really happen like overall plot wise to like move the larger narrative forward, I guess, which also I feel like is a big problem now that a lot of people get hung up with in general with like a lot of media, and they're like, well, this thing wasn't doing whatever for the plot. And I wish I could remember the quote from James Cameron, but it was something along the lines of like, there's a scene in Avatar, The Blue People, one where
the blue people,
the execs were fighting back about this shot that was like a minute, like 30 seconds or a minute long of them flying wherever, and it was just supposed to be like an emotional character thing, and he's like, no, I wanted the shot in there because I wanted it in there because like I felt something, so I feel like other people are going to feel something about it, and it's like like you don't, not everything needs to be to move the plot forward, like you need character and emotion and stuff, because if you don't have that, then the plot doesn't matter. Like if it's nothing but A to B, then you lose a lot
and it's boring.
Yeah, you lose the like art part of it and the story, that's not just they punched something or defeated the bad guy or whatever thing, like you need more than that, and this episode gives us a lot of that in really fun ways. And it's still like, again, I've noticed it with all of the episodes as we're rewatching them. It's wild how, I mean, like, obviously, like, it's a 24-minute cartoon, so like it's not the longest thing ever, but they all go by so quickly, and like put a decent amount in there, and it's so impressive every time.
We do. We get I forget how much we get in such a short amount of time. And going from the live action to this episode, you're like, oh my God, we got this in this sentence. We got this in this sentence. We got this in this sentence. And it just keeps moving, and it moves so fast, but you don't even realize you're moving that fast. It's amazing. All of a sudden you're like, oh wait, I learned all of this information, but I didn't even realize I learned it. Meanwhile, something that I think the live action does wrong is that they're spending like an hour monologue to tell you one thing.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, we get it. Okay, I know. Like, I find myself saying that a lot. With this show, by the end, I'm like, wait, I didn't even know I knew those things because of this whole episode.
Learned so much, but it was all just fun because Aang's doing like a couple different challenges.
Yeah. And it's all done so well and under the radar.
It's amazing. It's so amazing. We can get into a quick recap of the episode, I suppose. So they show up at Omashu, right? They get to the gates. And as you were saying, we see a big city for the first time, which is awesome. The shot, like, revealing the city is just amazing. Like,
it's so cool.
It's so cool. So we get that. We get them like sneaking into the city, and like you were saying, the Sokka comes up with the idea for the disguises, I believe. It's like, hey, we can do this, and this is how we'll get in, which is hilarious. And
mustache.
We see earthbending, and again, like, we see earthbending for the first time. So now we've covered all of the elements, seeing them all being bent, which is rad. I love the stance and the style that they established for earthbending right out the gate, which like
off the gate,
reinforced throughout the episode. But again, one of my favorite recurring things that happens in the show is how they use bending for doors and like pathways and stuff, and like how the different nations have them to like keep people that aren't earthbenders out, because like they have to bend the walls open to get in, and like that's just a recurring motif that I didn't really think about the first couple times I watched through the show, but ever since really noticing it at the air temple, and like it happens here, and it happens in a couple episodes, which we'll talk about when we get there with the fire temple. And like it's just a recurring theme, and like it's just so smart. Like it's such a, like,
you're right, I've never really thought about that, but
but all of them have it. Like it happens with the air temple, it happens here. I have to assume there's an example of it happening in the Water Nation at some point. I'm sure I'll notice it.
Like the ice, I think of the ice,
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's like
The North Pole.
I
We'll
feel
get
like
there.
probably they do. I can't remember off the top of my
Mhm.
head, but I'm like, it's got to be. There has to be. But
There's
yeah, and then
something. Yeah.
we see it with the fire temple, and like it's just it's such a smart in-universe thing that like of course this would be a way for them to secure their whatever
Mhm.
thing for each nation. And so we see that, we see the gates. They get let in after sneaking through, which is cool. I also
As
love the
Mr. Pippin Patalopsicopoulos,
yes, which is
the
such
second.
a good name. I
No, the
can't even say
third.
it.
The third.
It's so good though.
Yeah, I was like, try saying that right now.
No, I'm not even gonna do it.
Not even
Um,
gonna try.
I love the visual bit too of Momo being in the hay, like the
As the
straw.
ears.
Yeah, that and like
So
the
good.
guard like seeing him and being super confused whenever they first get in. Like that's so good.
So
Um,
funny. And I do
so
love
they
that
get through.
Katara too. She catches on immediately and is
Mhm.
so fast with that. She's like, and I'm June Pippin Papadopoulos.
Yeah, like
Which
she
I
really
didn't even know
sells
she
it.
heard it once and said it, but I just
Yeah.
like it shows how smart she is and how with it she is, and they're very
Mhm.
good at improvising.
Yeah, I feel like
Very
without
fast
her,
thinkers.
it definitely would have fallen apart instantly. There's no way the guards would have let them through. And they're like, oh. And then it's also a hilarious bit that they're like, Sokka, you can help your like elderly like grandpa
That's so
carry
good.
stuff.
I
And
love
he's like,
that.
yeah, carry my stuff, which is awesome. And so they get let in. We see, like you were talking about, how the delivery system works, which is again one of those
Mhm.
just super smart in
It's
universe
so
world building
creative.
things that we see where it's like, oh, of course, like this is how they would do that. I say, of course, it's such an like they had to think of this. So like, they had
Yeah,
to like
yeah.
come up
But it's
with,
like a
oh,
creative, and it shows that in this world, people are, very creative. They use engineering and they use how they use their bending in their daily life and how their
mhm,
bending helps them, and not just with fighting and not just with protecting themselves. They can use it
yeah.
to make their lives easier and efficient. And I think that's so creative and really cool, and a great little touch.
Yeah, it really goes to show like how bending informs the world, like you were saying, beyond just fighting, like how it would
Hmm.
really impact every section of life, and how they really think that through to like this isn't really an extreme, I guess that seems like a weird way to say it, but like they take it to its logical like conclusions and be like, okay, well,
Hmm.
if they're able to use bending, how would that change how they move things around in a big city?
Hmm.
And they think that through, and they're like, okay, well, we would do this. And so we get to see this huge um, delivery system, rail system. It's like roller coasters basically, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And so we get the
Which as a kid, you're
flashback.
like, I hope they're riding that.
Right, and of course they
And they
do.
do.
We get
Of
the
course they
flashback,
do.
and we see young Boomy and Aang playing on the chutes, and them like racing through. Which also, like in hindsight, it's really funny the first time you're watching through the show, thinking about like who King Boomy would be, because obviously the reveal at the end is that like King Boomy is
Yeah.
young Boomy, right? And it's just like watching as an adult or like going through the second time, you're like, oh, this is the most obvious thing. Like, of course, the person they're
Yeah,
setting
like
up in
of
the
course it's
flashback
him.
is
But
going
as
to
like
be
an
him.
8-year-old, I was like, I have no idea.
Yeah, you're like, ah, what? But his eyebrow is so funny. I love it the way like
But
how
yeah, they're like fuzzy.
they're so
Or
big,
they're
and he's
like,
got
what
the
are they?
like
They're like, yeah.
the huge arc,
The
and then his
tooth.
snort too, which I think it's funny that his snort doesn't come back when he's old until after they reveal that he's Boomy,
Yes.
which is funny and like makes
Hmm.
sense, I guess, because it would be a super obvious giveaway like right
Yeah.
before.
Because they use that in the live action episode. We'll get to that. I keep giving
Yeah,
away,
they
but
do. They do do
like
that
that's his
before.
giveaway.
Yeah,
Hmm.
which I don't know. That episode's way longer too, though. So I mean, like, I
So
guess
long.
it would make, well, it's because they like wrap in like four different things. We'll get there.
More different things.
We'll
We'll
get
get
there.
there again.
Um, so yeah, we get to see the flashback of them, which is cool. I
Hmm.
love seeing young, I say young Aang as if he's not young the entire time, but like the
Yeah.
before times Aang, like before his
Yeah, like who he
100 year
was a
stint.
100 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool seeing that personality come through and how he's interacting with other people. Um, so that's fun. And then that leads into Aang being like, hey, we need to ride the chutes. And we get the funny sequence of the gang riding through the chutes and the dangers and them just causing a ridiculous amount of property damage. Like, I can't even imagine
So
how many,
good.
like, tens of thousands or millions of dollars, equivalent worth of property damage. They're just like
The poor guy's
mowing.
cabbages.
Yeah. And of course, the cabbages have to get wrecked. And so they get caught and they get thrown into
Hmm.
jail, Well, they get brought to the King of Omashu, who
Hmm.
he immediately notices who Aang is. And if you know to look
Yeah.
for it, you can see the recognition on his face. He's like,
Yes.
oh, like, which,
He's like
I mean, yeah, Aang looks the exact same that he did 100 years ago. So of
100
course
years ago.
he's gonna recognize him, but he's really like curious about it. And so that's funny.
But to
I
think about it,
love,
he's like 100. He has to be like 112 also. Booming.
yeah.
Which
Yeah, 'cause I
also,
mean,
but in this universe,
people live
it's
so
known that
long.
people do live long. They can live
Yeah, they
that
have
long.
really extended lives, which is so
Hmm.
interesting to me. I mean, I guess it kind of, I don't, I don't know how much. I mean, it makes sense obviously, but it's just that it's a really. I like that they set that precedent early on. Like we're
Hmm.
5 episodes in, and it's like, well, clearly this dude's 100 plus easy. If
Yeah.
we're just taking that he was the same age as Aang, then yeah, he's 112 too. Maybe I always read him as being like a slightly older because he
Yeah.
feels like a year or two older than him in the
I was
flashback.
like, I was thinking like 114 or something.
Yeah, I don't. Maybe it's the hair that makes me feel that, but I also was like,
Or
it
the
seems like,
personality. He's so
yeah, he seems
strong.
like he's the like kind of like the kid that's a little bit older than you. That's like, no, we got to try, this that like talks you into doing stuff you shouldn't do
Yes. Yeah.
necessarily. Like he has that vibe, so I feel like he's a little bit older. Either
I
way,
agree. I
dude is
agree.
really old by now. Um,
Yeah.
and so I also like, and this is a small like animation theme or thing. I like the green lighting that we get whenever they're brought in the
Mm.
interiors in Omashu. Like it's a super powerful like green hue that's just over all of the like interior scenes there,
Mm.
which is super cool. It just like sets it apart from the outside, which is a very like orangey and yellow, like all earth
Yeah.
tones, obviously. But like it gives it a different vibe on the
Yeah.
inside, which I like a lot and think is cool.
And is that
Um,
from, you think, the crystals? Like they have those crystals that
yeah,
light everything? Yeah.
yeah. So it's the crystals lighting stuff, which is also the crystals are so sick too. Like all
That's
of
so
the
great.
Earth Kingdom's so cool. It's just really
Because I was
awesome.
thinking about can they bend crystals, but I realized in a way later episode, Aang does bend crystals. Like he has like crystal
Yes,
armor.
yeah, that is true.
I was like, that's pretty, that's pretty
Which is
powerful.
wild.
Imagine throwing
Earth,
crystals at somebody. Ow.
yeah. Oh, no, thanks. That would.
No thanks.
Yeah, I'm
I'm
good.
good.
I would not like to deal with that.
Don't need to fight an
Um,
earthbender.
so they get thrown into the prison cell. Well, one, Aang being the Avatar gets like outed pretty quickly, and he's like, "Oh, you
Yeah.
gotta let us go," and they're like, "Ah, nope." I also love the comedic bit about the renovation of the cell.
The
They're like,
renovations.
they're like, put him in
The
the like,
newly refurbished
yeah,
dungeon.
and he's like, "Wait, which
What
one is
is it
that?" And
called
he's like,
again?
the one that was the bad one, but is now the refurbished good one or whatever. I can't remember the
Or
exact
the
phrase right
chamber,
now.
chamber.
Chamber.
The
Yeah,
newly
it's
refurbished chamber. It's
yeah, he
just so
goes
good.
through the refurbished
There's
chamber that
yeah.
was once bad is amazing. Like,
It's so funny. There's my other favorite running gag in this whole episode is every time he makes a joke or makes like a bad dad joke, there's the cough in the background.
yeah,
It's
because
like
everyone's just
silent.
silent.
He's like, let us leave. And then there's just like a
So
it's
good.
just so funny.
It's great, honestly, and especially because the dad jokes are good. Like they're such good. I genuinely
They're so
laughed.
good.
I don't know how I forgot about it, but they are like the let us leave, and he's got the piece of let. Like, come on, man, that's too good.
Like as a kid, I was like, haha. But now as an adult, I'm like, no, that's funny.
It's genuinely
It's like
hilarious.
SpongeBob humor.
It's such a good bit. So they get thrown into the refurbished chamber that was once
Mhm.
bad. They try to escape. Aang's like, we can get through the vents, tries to send Momo in there. Momo does not fit, which is so funny.
Little fat
Um,
lemur.
yeah, he's he's been snacking a lot. He's been stealing
He's
Sokka's
snacking a lot.
food. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so they go to bed, and Aang wakes up to find that Sokka and Katara are gone, and now he's got to compete in these challenges.
Mm-hmm.
Um, again, the joke happens where Boomy's like, "How do you like my new outfit?" And it's the all purple, which is so just
It's so
starkly
funny.
different.
And I do love that it shows like his character and who he is, like how he's quirky and crazy. Like he's not actually crazy, but he's
He's
an
just
old man
weird.
with dad jokes. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's
he's just a
just
weird dude. He's like, I'm just
yeah.
gonna. He's like, I'm having a good time. I'm vibing. Like,
Yeah, I'm vibing. I know you're all
I like my
scared
new
of me,
duds.
but
He's like, I can do anything, but also, isn't my outfit cool?
and I'm wondering if that was a way for him to be like, look at me, do you recognize me?
Yeah. and Aang still
And he
doesn't
does
at
it.
first.
Yeah.
It's also good though that Aang's like, yeah, it looks good, and he's like, oh, you passed the first challenge, and he's like, oh, really? And
Yeah.
he's like, well, that wasn't really actually one of them, but like we'll get there.
Like his little
Um,
prankster.
yeah, which is great. And then so
Mhm.
that gets into the first challenge. Well, one, we established that there's now creeping crystal around
Mhm.
Sokka and Katara, which will it's the rock crystals that will just grow to encase them completely, which would be terrifying. I can't
Yeah.
imagine having rocks just like growing over your entire body and like not being able to do anything
Do
about it.
anything?
Well, I
That
mean,
sounds a little claustrophobic.
they could eat them, but they don't know that yet.
They don't know that
Which is
yet.
also, I feel like that can't be good for your mouth though. Like it has to.
Oh, have you ever had rock candy?
No, actually.
It's like so cavity inducing. One bite and you're like, oh,
You're like, oh,
straight sugar.
I've just ruined my whole mouth.
I just ruined my whole mouth. I used to be obsessed
Cool.
with it as a kid. And yeah, like the crunch.
Hmm.
And then Boomy takes a whole bite of it.
Yeah, he just starts downing it, which is hilarious.
Yeah.
Like, all right, man, I guess. So we've got the ticking clock now, where his friends are in danger, and so he's gonna have to go through all these challenges. So the first one is that he has to get the lunchbox key that's hanging from a chain in the middle of a waterfall, surrounded by a bunch of pointy rocks. This is just a cool like action sequence for the most part, kind of like it's him trying a couple different ways, and Boomy being like, "Oh yeah, no one's ever tried this before."
I
Like
do love that.
the normal
And I do like how
approaches.
it's a great way to show Aang's like way of thinking and his thought
Mhm.
process and how
Yeah,
he
because you
goes
really
about these challenges. Yeah. And
yeah, you
overcomes
go he
them.
goes through a couple different steps of like trying to figure it out, trying to get there. And then he eventually does get it. He like breaks one of the points off and throws that through after having like an air blast go through first to like get it,
Yeah.
and then he gets
Which
the
is so
key.
creative.
Oh, it's so cool. It's
Creative
such a
problem
cool.
solving.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's great. It's a good character moment. It's a great character moment. He gets it. And it's also I love
Character
how
moments are not filler.
yeah, and I love it. It's just like basically like F you whenever he like gets it above him. He's like, there's your key, man. Like I'm done. Bring me to the next
Yeah.
challenge. Like he's very over it. Um
I do love seeing Aang like this, like
just and like
being a cranky kid.
yeah, it's like impatience, but it's like a determined like impatience. It's not like
Yes.
like an impetuous is that the word I think that's the word I'm looking for. Like it's not like an annoyed.
Don't
I mean
ask
he is
me.
annoyed, but like he's just like I gotta get through. Like my friends are in
Yeah.
danger. Come on, let's go. Like
Like this is
uh,
serious. Yeah.
yeah, which is good. And then so challenge two, Aang needs to find Flopsy, who at
Love
first he
it.
thinks is the small bunny, which is adorable.
Which
And
is
then
funny. I love that bit.
yeah, it's such a good fake out between the two of them. Like
Hmm.
classic fake out. You gotta love it. And
And
then
Flopsy is a gorilla goat, I think. He's a cross between a gorilla and a goat.
the big one,
The big
actual
one,
Flopsy.
Flopsy.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
actual Flopsy.
because I guess the little one just isn't named. I'm gonna skip ahead and look at peek in this art book and see if they are. I don't.
I
Okay,
think
yeah, you're correct. It is a
it's
goat and a
just
gorilla, and I mean, I guess he's maybe just like a baby version of Big Flopsy.
I
He doesn't
wonder,
have his
oh,
like.
it just says long-eared rabbit,
Okay.
aka
Yeah.
fake Flopsy. They literally
Fake
call the rabbit
Flopsy.
fake Flopsy.
Great name. Very creative there.
Yeah.
Love to see it.
Aaron Alexovich
Yeah,
drew the rabbit with the long ears.
he's adorable.
Just a
And
long-eared
so
rabbit. Yeah.
we get him finding and taming actual Flopsy, who's it's a crazy cross, a gorilla and a goat. That's terrifying,
Right?
actually. Who ends up just being a little cuddly buddy. Like he just wants
Oh, he's so
he just wants
cute.
love and belly rubs and stuff. So that's how he solves the second challenge, is being like, oh, you just are nice. I need to pet you. Actually.
He's a big puppy. Yeah.
Yeah, which is so cute. And
Which is so
Katara and
good.
Sokka are getting more and more covered in the crystals. I can speak.
It's a
fine.
mouth twister.
A couple C words
fine.
right there. But yeah, so now we have the final challenge where Aang is placed in an arena and he has to pick an opponent. And so there's the two like super intimidating dudes that flank.
I love the two other designs of those two other people.
They're
They're
great.
so creepy.
They honestly are so hard. Like dude's got a huge axe and like all the spikes and stuff, and you're like, I don't want to fight like either
like,
of them.
dang.
And so Boomy is like, you can pick whoever's in front of you, and Aang's like, anyone in front of me, and he's like, I'm gonna outsmart this guy right here, and so he picks King Boomy.
He thought.
Jokes on you, Aang. That's what he wanted you to do. And so I love the reveal that King Boomy is just ripped, like he's just absolutely jacked, and It's hilarious. And so
It's such a good bit. And also, fun fact for anime fans, his stance is based off of the robots from Neon Genesis Evangelion, the Evangelions. It's like that stance, they wanted to incorporate that, which I think is just a very cool thing. And also, Flopsy is, oh, no, not Flopsy, actually. This is going to be for our next episode. But there's more Neon Genesis Evangelion inspiration within the show, which I love.
Is there like a new season of that going on right now? Because I've been seeing something.
No, they're releasing the movie back in theaters.
I've been
right
seeing
now,
a lot of talk about it recently, and I'm like, why is it coming up again?
I mean, it's a classic.
I'll get there eventually.
That'll be another show.
So we get the duel between Aang and Bumi, which is awesome. It's a really cool duel.
Great.
I made note of it, which we've talked about this because in the duels that Aang and Zuko had in earlier episodes, we noted how most of Aang's moves are evading, and Bumi literally says typical Airbender tactic: avoid and evade. So I like that the show does literally draw attention to the fact that like that is very much an Airbender thing. That's how they fight. Like they're not trying to actively be offensive.
They're mostly like pacifists.
Yeah, which is great. It's again character stuff that's so
Aang's
good.
gonna pass a fist through your face. I'm so sorry.
That's so good. That's a Boomy joke.
Got
if
that.
I one.
I need a cough. Sean, added a cough in there.
That's definitely going to be a short that gets pulled, I'm sure. But yeah, I mean, we get the duel between them, which is awesome. Just stellar animation, and again,
so like this is the first time I think we really see a master at their element. Besides Zhao.
Yeah, it's also the first time we see a really, I mean, like Aang and Zuko duel with opposing elements, but they're not really at the top of their respective. I mean, like Aang is a master airbender and Zuko's really good at firebending, but it's not exactly the same thing. So this is the first time we really see like a full-blown extended like bending versus bending in different like bending styles duel. And I mean, they're literally in an arena that's made for it, and like it's just
so
awesome.
sick.
It's
stuff
great
go
animation.
boom.
Yeah, like who doesn't love seeing stuff like giant rocks get thrown, and, like, blown up, and like come on, it's cool. It's a cool action sequence.
It's sick.
Yeah, and it also again further establishes the visual variety in how the bending styles are like portrayed and their choreography and stuff. Like you see a lot of the like foot stuff specifically for earthbending and like really obviously like being grounded and all of that.
Yeah, the movements are very like sharp and stiff.
Yeah.
And while the airbending movements are very flowy, like very much like water, they're
yeah, they're the water and air.
They're very airy.
They're very close in the flow state that they kind of have, and especially like again like we were saying, the evasive and deflection and those kinds of things. So that duel, I mean, it's awesome.
It shows us so much, and also a lot about Aang's fighting style, and it's great that we see this now, because just throughout the series we see how much better he gets and how, and like he learns from these fights. These fights don't just happen because they're like, let's animate a cool fight in here. They're like, this has a purpose, this has a reason, and he will learn from these moves. He will see how he moves and be able to predict like, okay, an earthbender does this, a pro earthbender will do this. It's very cool.
Yeah.
So I should do this. Yeah.
It's awesome. And so also the Bumi uses quicksand to stop Aang, which is
love that.
Sick. Yeah, that's a very like, hey, it's a early on them like kind of showing their hand in the different ways that you can use bending in ways that you wouldn't necessarily immediately think.
Yeah.
Like my mind.
Like we don't see that a lot, do we?
I don't know if we ever see quicksand like that again, actually. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that we probably do, but I can't think of it off the top of my head. But it is really cool just showing, like, we'll get there obviously with later stuff like lava and metal and like all of these kinds of like subsets of the different bending. But it's a really like, it goes to show how much they're thinking bigger in terms of the ways that you can utilize bending. Like, oh, earth bending, what does that mean fully? Like what all would you be able to do with that is a really cool thing.
Yeah, it's not just move
rocks. Yeah, it's
like
not just you can throw rocks.
And any show with like a power system in it, I love when they use it so creatively. And like I know a big comment about like Harry Potter or something, they use a lot of the same spells and you want to see like more. You want to see,
More.
you like, it gets really exciting when you see it used super creatively and you see it used differently.
Yeah.
And that's what the show, I think, is another thing it does really well. You see how far it can go.
It's the whole like application and technique versus just straight power, like with
Yes.
like a bending in specific. So that's fun. We get Aang thinking that he wins because he's got he's beaten him, but then there's a giant rock over his head, and Boomy's just like, oh, that's you like you did it. Like that's good.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah, like it's fine. Which is fun. And then
I love how he sinks through the ground. Also,
to
Boomy.
move. He does
wild.
like the coffin drop, which is so sick.
You're like,
he just like and then like moves through it and gets back up there to stop them. I wrote down in my notes, and I'm forgetting the context of it now, but Sokka says, oh, it's when they're trying to guess Boomy's name, and he goes Rocky because of all the rocks, and Katara says, we're gonna keep trying, but that's a good backup.
And it's such a small thing, but I love how Katara isn't like, no, you idiot.
Yeah.
Like a big thing of hers is like, great try.
She's like,
but we're gonna keep thinking of more.
She's like, I appreciate the effort, but probably not. Like, well, maybe not though. So we get that, and then the actual like resolution where Aang is like, oh, I figured it out. And again, the huge character moment that encapsulates what this entire episode is the quote where he's like, to solve each test, I had to think differently, which also is exactly what, spoiler alert, is exactly what he's going to have to do in the finale of the show. You know, he kind of gets it handed to him a little bit, but like, we'll get there. But like, like that's the entire, his whole thing though, and it gets more emphasized the further the show gets, is that he's like, everyone's like, oh, you're just gonna have to kill Ozai, and he's like, no, I don't want to do that. Like, that's not how I want to solve this. I want to do it differently.
There has to be another way.
Yeah. And like and this is part of like reinforcing that lesson for him and being like, yeah, like there is another way. Like, I just have to think about it in a different way, which is great.
It is really cool because this whole show does do that. They really do. Like, as the audience, they have you thinking differently. Like with Zuko, you think he's the villain the whole time, but then throughout the show, you're like, wait, maybe not. And then even with the bending, you're like, this is how they use that. And then they use it another way. And you're like, wait, maybe not. Like, you have to be on your feet, and it has you thinking. It has you staying awake and keeping your eyes open. Anything can happen. And
yeah,
I think that's just that main theme of thinking differently is seeps so deep into this entire series.
They like keep it going through the whole time, which is great.
Yeah.
And then even Boomy hammers it home more. He's like, whenever you'll have to face the Fire Lord, and like says, and when you do, I hope you'll think like a mad genius. And like, yeah, he does. He thinks differently to like accomplish the goals, which is great. And so that is basically it. That's the episode, I believe. Those are the end of my things. Talks about how he'll meet his friends. Aang takes Boomy on a ride through the delivery system, and they crash into the cabbage.
Oh yeah,
again and
we
get my cabbages again, and then
I'd be so pissed. What's that meme where it's like, imagine you're in the Avengers like Marvel universe, and Captain America uses your car to throw, and he misses, and you're like,
yeah. You're like, awesome. I had like a payment left.
I had one payment left. I just paid that off.
Awesome,
and it didn't even work.
Yeah.
That's how I imagine the Cabbage Man feels in this universe.
Terrible. Yeah, that's probably, he's like, he needs to find something else to sell. Maybe if he was doing anything else, it'd be fine.
But we find out in Korra. Cabbage Incorporated.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Man makes it. We'll get there.
We'll get there. So when we come back, guys, we're going to talk more about the episodes and how they compare to the live action version of the series, which we are very excited to do. So we will be right back.
Hi, my name is Negan.
And I'm Bree. Enjoying this show on the Aspect Network?
Then check out Viltrumics, an Invincible podcast.
Each week, we go back and discuss your favorite episodes of the series and review new episodes as they release right on Amazon Prime.
Join us as we travel space, time, and the multiverse with Mark Grayson and discuss one of the most exciting superhero series on TV on Viltrumics, here on the Aspect Network.
And now, back to the show.
All right, guys, welcome back to Bending the Narrative. Each week, we dive into Netflix's Avatar: The Last Airbender live action series. And while you can find our overall thoughts on the season in our first episode, throughout book one, we will be discussing in further detail how each episode compares to this live action counterpart. So, Alex, let's start with you.
Yeah,
King of Omashu.
This episode's weird because there's so many things in the live action version of this episode that are just added to what we see in book one in the animated series. We're going to try to not dive too much into stuff that will come in later because we'll talk about all of that when we get to those respective.
We'll mostly talk about Boomy, I think.
Yeah, so we'll mostly try to keep it Boomy centered and like kind of the like first Omashu exposure centered stuff, which is fun. So I know actually that we do, and we talked about this in our overall thoughts episode about Boomy's depiction in the live action versus the animated. I did still really like Boomy in the live action version as compared to the animated version. I have to admit, animated Boomy has grown on me each subsequent time that I've seen him. And part of it is because as I had mentioned, like I'm not the biggest fan of like the kind of goofball comedy stuff, even though I'm kind of feel like that's changing a little bit for me because all of the visual gags and things in this show are just getting me so hard. Like every time I'm just crying now. Like it's hilarious. Like it's good, but in the live action series, I did like how they made him like very serious, and I like I think that it worked for what they were doing there, as opposed to at that point in the show, they were really hammering home the theme, which they kind of lose it the further they get into the season. But they were really hammering home the theme of like how much the 100-Year War had like impacted everyone and like how detrimental that was and like what that did. And so I felt like it worked that Boomy was super, super serious there as opposed to how he is in the animated series. But at the same time, you do lose like basically all of the comedy that you get in the animated version, which is not exactly great. I mean, like he's pretty funny in the live action version too, but he's just like a lot more angry and a lot. He's
very like angry and intense, and he's I don't know the right word to say it, but he's very mad at Aang. And he takes a lot of his frustrations out on Aang, being like, that's not at all in the animated series. We don't get that at all. That we feel that he has some sort of resentment towards Aang for abandoning them. Because I'm assuming Omashu, not Omashu, his name is Boomy, King of Omashu, Boomy.
King Omashu.
Like, I'm assuming like he's a very smart guy. He's portrayed, he's a mad genius. He thinks very, not the way anybody else would think. So when he sees Aang for the first time, I'm assuming he guesses like something must have happened because he still looks the same.
Yeah.
As he did 112 years ago. So something must have happened. He must have just come back. Like he's not thinking he abandoned us on purpose or anything. Because in this, it's almost like he blames him for that.
Yeah, one of the quotes that I highlighted from the live action version is he said, "But you haven't lived these 100 years." And he's like, he says that with spite. Like he feels very scorned about it in the live action version.
Spiteful.
Which is not at all how he is in the animated one. Like the animated one is not like he's not doing the tests and the challenges as punishment. He's doing them as like, I'm trying to help you grow because I've spent the last 100 years growing a little bit. Like obviously he's still this weird, quirky old dude and maintains those qualities that he had in his youth, but he obviously like has seen a bunch of stuff in the last 100 years, right? And like grown from it. And he's
supposed to be like a wise mentor. So I feel that anger and that frustration kind of doesn't make him look as wise. Like a thing that Monk Gyatso says is, I forget the exact quote, but it's something like, we cannot dwell on what is. We can only think about like, or what was, we can only think about what is and like what's happening in the future. Like meaning like, don't dwell on the past. And it's a very like wise monk thing to say. And I think that's something Boomy was very wise about. He was like, okay, I can't be angry about the past, but let's just prepare him for the future.
Yeah. Whereas in the live action one, he's very much, it does feel like punishment and like he's trying to belittle almost, or just like, he feels angry, which again, I think in the context of what they're where they're at in the show. Ironically, this is the last episode in the live action one where they kind of continue this theme. Like they kind of just drop it after this. Of like
Yeah.
everyone being like of really emphasizing how the war has impacted everyone in the last 100 years. Like, because then we get into the spirit world stuff and like the whole thing just
Which
falls
takes
off
us away from everything.
falls off a cliff as far as everything that happens from the, but like we'll get there very soon.
We'll get there.
And so, hey, while I was watching this episode, the live action one, I did enjoy it and I did like this version because I do like that seriousness in a sense, and I feel like it works for what they're going for, but it is such a major departure from how his character feels in the animated show.
Yeah.
And it's just a really, it's a, like you can see how they got to that decision. Like it makes, like I understand the dots that they connected there, and they were like, well,
But I don't like it. That's the thing.
It's tough because I do
like I
like
understand, but it
in
just
a
still it
vacuum.
doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like maybe the best choice. Like it feels like the obvious choice. I think that's a lot of things that they did. They were the obvious choices instead of like actually
That's a good
creatively
point.
thinking it through. And like we were just saying, a great thing about this show is how creative everything is and how well thought out all these bending and fight scenes are done. And
well, I mean, because like it feels like they
in
didn't.
that show.
It feels like they took the critique that the King of Omashu episode was mostly filler.
Boring.
And so they were like, okay, it feels like they took the wrong lesson from it. It feels like they took the lesson was that Boomy's mad about Aang not being here for 100 years. And so like he punished, they're like, obviously.
Like, no, guys, he's a mad genius. It's like they misunderstood that.
they obviously,
That's the
they have
reason.
the fight at the end, which, because they're like, oh, we have to have this action sequence. And of course we're going to do that, which also the fight does not look great in the live action version. It looks better than the clip that they released whenever before the show came out, where I was like, oh, this is kind of rough. And like, it's fine in the live action version, but it also just doesn't compare.
It's just really. So it's animated. It's CGI.
Yeah,
but it's not
the animated
good.
Version just looks better. Like
it's like so much better.
You lose so much of the momentum and the character in the animation in the adaptation of it. And so like they kept that part of it, but they got rid of like the whole point of that episode, as we were just talking about, is the growth for Aang, and you don't get the other challenges. You don't get the problem of Sokka and Katara being in trouble with the creeping crystal and stuff.
And like that's the reason he's fighting. He's fighting to save them.
Yeah, which like you get them in trouble in a very different way in the live action one, because we get so many things from book 2 in the live action.
Yeah.
In this live action episode, like we get the secret tunnel and the Badger Mole.
Which, why are siblings in the tunnel of love? Let's
see. Okay, it's
Sweet Home Alabama.
I don't want to get into it
what
too
are we
much.
doing here?
We'll obviously talk about the tunnel when we get there properly. I don't hate the idea, because the character growth that Katara and Sokka get when they're in there, I think is good, and the like respect for each other, and like we need to like work together, and like it's fine, and like I think that is good. But also, I have to assume we're not going to go back to the secret tunnel later on in our live action series because of that, and that goes hand in hand with them both just like axing any of the possible Aang and Katara stuff. That's present through the entire first book in the animated series, as we talked about. Like they very obviously have feelings for each other, but all of that is just not present in the live action show to this point or through the end of the first season. Which
there's like no love in it.
Yeah.
You're like, do they even like each other?
I don't know, maybe. I mean, they're obviously friends, but they're supposed to, eventually be more than that. And there's the animated series very much lays the groundwork of that. And so there's that. I mean, like I put out another quote from Boomy from the live action one where he's like, you don't know what it means to be in a war. And so that's again just like more of the spiteful, like he's angry about it. Which
I always think of, what is it in Harry Potter? They say there was this one scene where in the book it's written that what's his name? The wizard's name?
Which one?
Dumbledore.
Oh, okay.
That was
there's a lot
brain
of
spasm.
wizards in
There's a
there.
lot of that was the worst way to put that. But the wizard,
The one.
Dumbledore, he goes up to Harry and he says, like he said calmly, Harry, did you put your name in the Goblet of Fire? And in the movie, he's like, Harry, did you put your name in the Goblet of Fire? And he
He's,
screams
yelling.
it.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the difference we get here. We're like, no, and it kind of takes away from the character because you're like, he's supposed to be this
He's a
a
friend.
wise sage who knows everything, who's been around, who like nothing will get him angry or upset anymore because he's learned to control his emotions, because like that's what makes a sage so wise is,
Mm-hmm.
they
That
know why everybody
experience.
acts the way they do and that experience, and
Yeah.
but nothing
that's
really gets to
interesting.
them.
One thing I wanted to bring up, and this is like a theory that I've seen online and that has been talked about, is that Aang might whether or not Bumi is royalty, and like whether or not Aang knows royalty in the Earth Kingdom, or conversely whether or not Bumi somehow took the throne in Omashu like by force or whatever means might have come from it, because like we don't know what
He
happens
saw
in
his
that.
opportunity and took it.
Like we don't know what happens in those 100 years, between Aang's absence. And so I think either route is very interesting, because one, it would make sense for the Avatar to be positioned to be friends or have allies that are in the high positions in the different nations and stuff. And so it makes sense that they're like, hey, you should be friends with this kid who's eventually going to grow up to be, the king of Omashu and like rule that. And so that would make sense. And there's also super interesting. That's something that I know is explored more with a lot of the past avatars we see in their direct relations with the other like leaders in the nations and navigating all of the politics and all of that kind of stuff. And so it's interesting that we might have seen a little tidbit of that in the flashback with Bumi and Aang in animation. But it's an interesting thought that like he either did
that it was like on purpose that they had him be friends with all of these like officials and royalty and
figures that are going to be,
because he had a friend in the Fire Nation. Was it a royal?
I'm not sure. I'm totally blanking on that.
I'm totally blanking on that. But he said he also has a friend in the Fire Nation. And a lot of
it's interesting.
High up.
Yeah, it makes sense. But then also
that it would be set up that way.
I also think it would. I love the idea that Bumi just like took the throne.
He just took it over.
Like, this is mine now. Like it's like at some point in the 100 years.
He was like, so you guys see how powerful I am? Yeah.
I'm gonna
like, or maybe he was like, I don't want the Fire Nation to take over. And all of you dum-dums can't keep our city safe.
Like, was there always a king of Omashu? Is he the first king of Omashu? Like, because
I mean, there's like the Earth Kingdom king.
Yeah, which is also an interesting thing that you have too. So, like, yeah, the fact that the Earth Kingdom would have multiple monarchs is very interesting. It would, I mean, I guess it plays into like how, especially for Ba Sing Se, like there's no war outside of Ba Sing Se, like it plays into the division of the Earth Kingdom as far as like, well, they don't really acknowledge anything past the main
outside. Yeah, so maybe Ba Sing Se is just its own little thing.
And
because then there's also Kyoshi Island. Like, is that ruled by?
Though, dude, it's the not girl that they have. Even though, even though it's Kyoshi Island, which is interesting. I don't know. That there's a lot of interesting stuff there as far as like how's the Earth Kingdom politics going? I mean, and it also just makes sense.
I haven't thought about that much.
Like kind of screwed up because of the 100-year war. Like they're not really that worried, I guess, about like keeping solid track of all of that. Like they just let the different.
They're worrying about themselves right now to not be.
It would make sense
over.
if it's kind of how you have the different. I'm blanking on their names, but in like feudal Japan, you would have the different.
Oh, the shoguns.
Yeah, and
it's like the shogunate, and then there's
the prefectures. Is that what they would be called? The different.
Oh, this is the real quiz. This is the real quiz here.
I literally went to a samurai museum like a week ago, and I was reading stuff about this. Yeah, it was so cool.
I'm trying to think of that History of Japan video by like what's his name, Bill Wirtz.
But like, I guess I wonder if it would be something similar to that the Earth Kingdom, which it would make sense if they took inspiration from that, where you have the different like rulers throughout, and then there's the one main.
That's something I do like that they did in the live action, that they really leaned into the Earth Kingdom being inspired by India, and that it has a really big Indian inspiration.
Yeah, you definitely do see that in
that Paul.
marketplaces and the like the city, whatever you. I will
Yeah,
say,
and especially like in the castle with King Boomy and his headdress and
Mhm.
all the food and all the
the
decor,
banquet. Yeah,
the banquet. Yeah,
it really looks like it, and that's
you have
also
like
when you
somebody has
get
like a sari on, I think.
and
Hmm.
that episode's the one where we get the like uh blanket fight with Zuko and Aang, right? Is that it's the same
The
episode where
boy,
they're like that's what it is, right? Are that the tapestries or the blankets
I think yeah,
where
where he
they're
like
like
wraps him up in the
yeah,
tapestry.
and they do
Yeah,
like the random slow-mo for parts of it, which I was like, okay, I mean,
it's
I,
just so
I guess we could do slow-mo here, sure. Like
sure.
I suppose. And that's also when you'll want to talk about this. We get the slight Zutara moment where like he like gets the edge
Guys,
of her like scarf
guys.
or whatever and is like I can't get behind it. I'm sorry, I can't do it. It's
Well,
not
you're a loser, so.
the oppressed should not fall in love with her oppressor. I'm sorry. That's just not it's
But
not.
he's not. He's a good guy.
But he kind of is
He's
though.
he's just
He's
lost.
he's the prince
He's a
of the
good guy
fireworks.
in a bad situation. Okay.
I mean, yeah, eventually, but
I
like,
can
come on.
fix him.
It's not.
That's
We've
what
lost-
it is. We've lost the plot. We've
Yeah, we lost the plot, but it's fine. Like that does happen in that episode, though. Is I believe.
Yeah,
it's
he
he's
like
in the marketplace.
grabs her scarf, right?
Yeah, I
Does
guess
he
when
sniff it, or am I crazy?
no, he doesn't sniff it. He just like.
I swear to God, I thought he was like.
Nah, I don't think so. That'd be weird. Come on, Zuko, get it together, man.
Because I feel like
Um,
I'd be like, I remember it was like there was something a little weird about it.
There's
But I think
definitely, I
was
mean, like
just
he definitely like lingers and like looks, and I feel like
lingers,
it's
I think.
weird that he doesn't notice that it's her, but there is
Mhm.
again, it's just a random use of slow mo for a second. Which
Yeah.
is like, okay, I guess. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, I don't
Mhm.
know. The weirdest thing about the live action episode is just that they chose to like combine so many different episode plots from future things
It's
into it.
very, and it just feels very, like, it feels forced. It all feels like they tried to cramp it all together because they're like, well, we're here. And if we don't put this all in, everybody's going to get bored and they're going to want to
Yeah.
leave. And let's, haha, like, did you notice this? Did you notice this? Wink, wink. I was like,
it's
okay,
tough.
but like, let's watch a show.
It's tough.
Can I have a show here?
I like the episode in a vacuum. I think it's an interesting, like, kind of political thriller almost type episode where they've got, you know,
Yeah.
the like intrigue of like the terrorists that are messing stuff up and like trying to like destroy Homashu essentially and like blame it on the Fire Nation and like all of that. And like you get Jet and all of them, which we'll get more into them later. But, and so like I think
Mhm.
that in a vacuum, the episode is solid. Like I enjoyed watching the episode just as its own thing. But then
Yeah.
when you zoom out and think about it, you're like, well, they just took things from way down the line and like shoved it here. And
Yeah,
so
'cause
now
they're
that
like-
kind of like
They feel like they
messes
have
up-
no time at all.
yeah, which
which-
again, it's so weird that what they did and didn't want to put into the first season, considering it's technically longer than book one. Like it has a longer runtime than the first book does. But they decided to cut a bunch of stuff from book one and port in a bunch of stuff from
And then
book
like
two.
spend 5 hours just like standing in a room talking at each other.
Yeah.
Like that
It's-
works in Game of Thrones, but not here.
This is not Game
Stop.
of Thrones though.
It's not because you don't have Game of Thrones writing. You know why that doesn't work? Like,
Yeah, no, that is that's a very real thing, and it's something too that a lot. I feel like especially with that comparison, it gets lost a lot now, where people think that what a lot of Game of Thrones was the end of Game of Thrones, like the last couple seasons, where it's like a ton of battles and a ton of action, and a ton of
yeah,
this stuff, which like depending on who you ask, a lot of people say like is not what Game of Thrones should have been. Because they also like ran out of book to adapt it. So they were like, well, we're just gonna do a bunch of stuff. And like I'm in the minority. I like the last couple of seasons of Game of Thrones a lot, except for the ending. This is not a Game of Thrones podcast, but
stuff go boom.
Yeah, I mean stuff go boom is pretty cool. But like the thing though, the point is that people forget the first like 5 seasons are what you just said, was just people talking for the most
Yeah.
part. Like it was just conversation.
And that works. It's like it's character building, it's conversations, and it's all subtext. It's all like
Yeah.
they're saying this, but really they mean this, and
Mhm.
you see that
And it's-
so much. And
and it's showing how the world works and like the character motivations and things like that, and that's stuff that the animated show does really well too. Like, of course you're going to have your action sequences and whatnot because it's a kids cartoon. You need to have those in there and like keep attention. And
like I describe this as it's fast food. Like they want to just get to the point so fast that you miss why it's good and why it's worth it. They just give it to you so quick that you're like, oh, well, it's not good then. I didn't work for it.
And
like,
it's still so, the combination of things is so weird in the live action episode. It's so odd.
It's like, so forced. I'm actually shocked there's no Haru.
Yeah.
There's no Haru at all,
that's the other thing, and which we'll get into in our next episode. Like they just cut all of
in prison,
which we'll get there.
Yeah,
but like that's something again,
which I think is very important.
Yeah, it's huge. But like it gets into the runtime thing of like you did have the content to work with and the character growth and stuff to work with, but instead they poured it in a bunch of stuff that we didn't need here.
Yeah.
And that if you think about it, you're like, well, there was probably a reason that they did this in the animated series and then saved these things for later on because they'll have relevance later on. And so it creates this weird cascade and domino effect of like, I don't know what they're gonna do when we get to where the things that they shoved here should have been later on, like I don't understand what's gonna happen. Like they're now gonna
I can't even predict anything. I'm like, I have no idea. Who's to say?
Because I also have to imagine that it'll, again, similar to this season, I have to imagine season 2 of the live action will be a slightly longer runtime than book 2 of the animated series. But again, there's a lot of things that they took out. And so the math is not mathing.
Why? It's just not.
I don't get it. But
it all felt like a little like, oh, it's the Cabbage Man. Oh. Yeah. Which also another anime inspiration for my anime fans out there. Cabbage Man is inspired by Cowboy Bebop, the 3 men that appear on like every planet. The writers wanted something like that, and I just think that's hilarious because that's one of my favorite parts of Cowboy Bebop.
No, that's incredible.
The only saving grace, the Cabbage Man.
we do love the cabbage, but that again goes into
and the way they bait it.
I think that's one of the things with the live action is that they're like, well, we know X, Y, and Z is a big thing in the fandom. Like we know the Cabbage Man is a huge thing. They give him a poster, right, to promote.
Yeah.
Like we know that's a huge meme, and so we're definitely going to have that in the show. And which, granted, it is in the animated series in this episode, but like we know that like the Secret Tunnel song is like a huge thing in the fandom, and so they're like, we don't want to wait to book 2 to get there. We're going to put it in now, and it's like, okay,
because we'll lose that.
Yeah, which is like, no, they just wanted it. Like, it's like you were just saying, like, they wanted it now. They wanted that instant. Like, we've got it in there. Everyone can talk about it. Like, it's there.
Yeah, we satisfied that just in case we don't get renewed or we don't get a green light for the next 2 seasons.
Which they did, which
they did.
Yeah, they did.
So now what?
For 2 and 3, which makes sense. I mean, I wasn't really, I didn't doubt that.
That means we have to watch it. Oh.
I know we have to. I do wonder. We talked about this a little bit in our group chat. I wonder if it means they'll film 2 and 3 back to back.
Those kids will grow fast.
They're gonna age. Like, that's gonna be a real thing. And so I feel like they kind of like have to. Like, I don't. I mean, they have the source material to work with for 2 and 3, so get going on those scripts, and like start banging them out.
It's gonna be all AI scripts and
because I can't imagine they're gonna have like film 2 and then have another break and then film 3.
Yeah, they're not gonna have a break. They're gonna go right into it.
I mean, Sokka's already not a kid, right? It's
gonna look like Stranger Things, yeah.
Yeah,
those kids have like mustaches and acne, and
like taking a year for them to film their final season, but that's a whole other thing.
This isn't a Stranger Things podcast either.
We're just dropping all of the other like shows and stuff in here.
All the other shows, yeah.
This live action episode was something. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's
so live action bad, animation good.
Yeah, pretty much is the thing. Boomy is
that's the summary.
I'll say acceptable in the live action one. There are things that I like about it. And you just
I disagree. Wrong.
Full 0 out of 10. That's fair. I mean, it happens. Yeah.
But the actor Utkarsh Ambudkar, I don't hate on actors. Actors
He did a great job, I think.
You did what you had to do. And I get it. You still pull through.
Bro got ripped. I have to assume that was all him.
Yeah.
I know obviously the facial stuff is not all him.
Yeah, that's makeup.
Which
Alex, that's makeup.
Really good. I mean, he looked great as far as
it was really. I had no idea. I was like, is that really an old man? Did they get him? I was fooled.
No, yeah, and looking at I was googling him a second ago, looking at his like actual like normal face.
Like he's a young guy.
Yeah. Oh, he's 40, but
he's 40. Oh, he's 40? No way.
Yeah, which also I guess it depends on which pictures get pulled up, It's probably the pictures are probably in his 30s. But yeah, no, I mean they did a great job with his makeup and stuff. He's cool.
That was beautiful. Appreciation for hair and makeup team.
Yeah.
You did good on that.
They did a great job for a lot of it. Some of the wigs were
some of the wigs.
His wig was solid.
That was good. Yeah, it was all, it was mostly a hat, but all right, guys. Well, thank you so much for tuning into Bending the Narrative this week. Next week, we are continuing our journey with the underrated episode Imprisoned. But before that, Alex, where can people find you online?
You can find me online at AP Batman with 2 T's. Basically, whatever social media there is, I'm on there at that at.
Perfect. You can find me online at Kate the Official on Instagram. And please be sure to subscribe here to The Aspect on YouTube and any platform where podcasts are found. Please give us a like, leave a comment, turn on that bell for notifications. Yeah. And you can also follow us on Twitter/X, Instagram, and TikTok at The Aspect Co. So thank you guys so much for listening, and Flameo Hotman.